Ida my Mill said she never liked me and now I don't want to host Thanksgiving. When I first met my partner's mom, I was so nervous I could barely breathe. I'd heard stories about her how she could be blunt, set in her ways, and very traditional. She wasn't rude exactly, just particular. I wanted her to like me. I knew how important she was to my partner, and since I didn't have much of a family of my own, the idea of being embraced by someone else's family felt like this beautiful, almost cinematic dream. So, I did my homework. I asked my partner about customs or things that might make her feel respected, and I followed through. When we first met, I made sure to look presentable, smiled a lot, and made polite conversation even though my anxiety was screaming in my head the entire time. I cooked her meals from scratch, traditional recipes, seasonal ones, things I knew she'd love. She lit up when I served her my first dinner, and for the first time, I thought, maybe this will work. Over time, I started hosting holidays for the family. Those moments felt like a dream come true. My partner and I didn't have a lot of downtime because of our business, but I poured my heart and soul into these gatherings. I cooked for days, making sure everything was perfect, candles lit, table settings just so, homemade desserts stacked on a tiered stand. It wasn't just about impressing her, it was about creating something I'd always longed for. My family had never celebrated holidays like that. They were chaotic, sometimes downright depressing. Seeing everyone happy and gathered in my home made me tear up more than once, though I always excused myself quietly when those emotions hit. I didn't want anyone, especially not her, to see me cry. Over the last year or so, though, we hadn't seen her as much. Life got busy with work, and weekends slipped away faster than I'd like to admit. I started to feel guilty about it. She's in her 80s and not as mobile as she used to be. So, I decided to plan a day just for her. I called and invited her to coffee at her favorite local shop and lunch afterward. She sounded pleased, and I could tell she liked the effort I was putting in. The day arrived, and I picked her up. She was waiting at the door with her cane, dressed up a little more than usual, which made me smile. As soon as she saw me, though, her eyes lit up, and she said, "Wow, you've lost weight." I froze for a moment, unsure how to respond. She kept going, complimenting me multiple times, telling me how pretty I looked and asking to take selfies with me. She was beaming. Now, here's the thing. I have a complicated history with my body. I've struggled with eating disorders in the past, starving myself, obsessing over calories, overexercising until my legs felt like they would give out. It's something I've worked hard to overcome. And while I knew she was trying to compliment me, something about the way she kept bringing it up made my stomach churn. But I smiled anyway and said, "Thank you." At the coffee shop, she kept the compliments coming. She posted the selfies to Facebook right there, saying she wanted to show off how beautiful her daughter-in-law looked. I felt a little weird about it, but again, I didn't want to make a scene. I kept telling myself, she means well, she doesn't know. When we got to the restaurant for lunch, she started in again. "You look great now," she said. "You were okay before, but too overweight." My breath hitched, and I felt this sharp sting in my chest. I don't even know why it hurt so much. I've heard worse in my life. But the way she said it so matter of fact, like it was just an observation, caught me off guard. I blinked back tears, trying to focus on the menu, though nothing looked appealing anymore. When the food came, I couldn't eat. I pushed my salad around on the plate, nibbling on a few dry bites here and there, while she and my partner chatted and ate like everything was normal. Maybe they didn't notice, or maybe they just didn't say anything. Either way, I felt like I was underwater, every word muffled, every movement slow. After lunch, she needed to use the restroom, so I helped her up and steadied her as we walked. She washed her hands while I stood nearby, and out of nowhere, she turned to me and said, "You know, I never liked you, but you're okay now." My brain short-circuited. I didn't know what to say, so I just stood there, holding her cane while she dried her hands like she hadn't just dropped a bomb on me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This whole time, I thought I was building something, earning her approval, creating a bond, but to hear her say she'd never liked me? And the fact that she thought this was somehow a compliment, I couldn't process it. I don't know what it was about that moment, but it broke something in me. It wasn't just the comment though that alone had been bad enough, but the accumulation of everything. All the effort, the emotional labor, the care I'd poured into trying to be accepted and loved, and then hearing her bluntly say she'd never liked me until now. It felt like everything I'd done was worthless. Like I was worthless unless I fit some arbitrary standard of hers. And the weight of that realization hit me like a freight train. When her words sank in, I felt my face flush, my throat tighten, and my vision blur with tears I couldn't fight back anymore. I tried to stay composed, but my voice cracked as I stammered that her son would be back in a minute to help her to the table. My hands trembled as I turned and made my way back, my head down, desperately hoping no one else in the restaurant noticed my red eyes. When I got to the table, I leaned in close to my partner and said quietly, almost too quietly to be heard, that I was going to take an Uber home. I couldn't bring myself to explain it all right then, but I told him I was upset about something his mom had said and needed some space. I could feel him looking at me, confused, maybe even annoyed, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to sit there, pretending everything was fine, while the lump in my throat threatened to choke me. As I walked out of the restaurant, I heard his mom calling my name. Her voice wasn't angry, it was light, almost concerned, but I couldn't face her. I kept walking, fumbling for my phone, and ordered an Uber as quickly as I could. The ride home was a blur. I stared out the window, watching the city pass by without really seeing it, replaying her words over and over in my head. I never liked you, but you're okay now. The worst part wasn't even the words themselves. It was the deeper implications. Had she always been pretending to like me? Were all those holidays, the compliments on my cooking, the smiles, and the laughter at my table just fake? Was she only tolerating me because I was the woman her son chose, and now that I'd lost weight, I was finally worth something to her? It felt so hollow, like every warm memory I'd cherished had been tainted. By the time I got home, I was angry, not just at her, but at myself. I had bent over backward for this woman. I'd hosted countless holidays, spent hours planning meals, cleaning, decorating everything. I'd been the one pushing my partner to visit her, to keep the relationship strong. Every coffee date, lunch, or dinner we'd had was because I made it happen. Not him, me. And now she thought it was fine to casually dismiss me like that. To reduce my worth to the number on a scale, it wasn't just hurtful, it was dehumanizing. When my partner got home later, I could tell he was annoyed. He didn't understand why I'd left, and I didn't feel like explaining it all over again, but I tried. I told him how much her comment had hurt me, how it made me feel like nothing I'd done mattered unless I looked a certain way. He brushed it off, saying I'd misunderstood her. She's old, he said. She's a blunt Asian mom, they say things like that, and she didn't know you struggled with eating disorders. She didn't mean anything by it. That's the thing, though. Whether or not she meant to hurt me doesn't erase the fact that she did. Intent doesn't negate impact. And what really stung was that my partner didn't seem to get it. He chalked it up to a cultural difference or generational gap, excusing her behavior without acknowledging how it made me feel. He even said it was normal for mothers not to like their sons' partners at first because we take them away. That floored me. Take him away. I wasn't the one who distanced him from her, he made those choices himself. If anything, I was the one trying to bridge the gap between them. I started thinking about Thanksgiving. It was coming up in a few weeks, and the thought of hosting another holiday for his family made me feel sick. Why should I spend days cooking, cleaning, and stressing, just to welcome someone into my home who only decided I was okay now that I'd lost weight? Someone who never liked me in the first place. It felt like a slap in the face. But canceling Thanksgiving felt like a big step, one I wasn't sure I had the right to take. I worried I was overreacting, that I was being overly sensitive. She's old. She's blunt. She doesn't know my history. Those were the excuses I kept repeating to myself, trying to justify her behavior and convince myself to let it go. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, the hurt didn't go away. At the same time, I couldn't stop thinking about the emotional labor I'd been carrying in this relationship, not just with his mom, but with his family as a whole. I was the one who made sure the holidays were perfect, the one who reached out, the one who kept the traditions alive. And yet, I was the one being told I'd taken him away. The injustice of it all made my blood boil. I kept thinking about how much effort I'd put into those holidays, how I stayed up late to bake pies from scratch, triple-checked every detail of the table settings, and made sure everyone's favorite dish was on the menu. I thought about how exhausted I'd been after each one, how my feet ached from standing all day, and how I barely got to enjoy the meals because I was too busy making sure everyone else was happy. And now, it all felt hollow. Why should I deplete myself to create a beautiful Thanksgiving when I wasn't even sure I wanted to be around these people anymore? I don't know what I'm going to do yet. Part of me feels like canceling Thanksgiving is the right choice, not as a punishment, but as a way to reclaim my boundaries and protect my mental health. But another part of me wonders if I'm being selfish, if I'm ruining the holiday for everyone else over something I should just let go. I'm torn between wanting to stand up for myself and wanting to keep the peace. Update 1. The next day, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was my partner's mom. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my stomach twisting into knots. I didn't want to answer. I wasn't ready to face her or the complicated tangle of emotions her words had stirred up in me. But the phone kept ringing, insistent, and eventually, I sighed and swiped to answer. Her voice was bright and cheerful when she greeted me, almost as if nothing had happened the day before. "How are you doing?" she asked. I forced myself to reply politely, keeping my tone neutral, though my chest felt tight. I didn't want to let on how hurt I still was, but I also didn't have the energy to fake warmth. I told her I was fine, just busy with work. Then came the question I'd been dreading. "Why did you leave so early yesterday?" she asked. There was a hint of curiosity in her tone, maybe even concern, but I couldn't bring myself to answer right away. I considered making up an excuse, something vague about errands or work, but before I could fully commit to the lie, she cut me off. "Don't lie," she said firmly. Her bluntness hit me like a slap. It wasn't rude, exactly, it was just how she was, direct to the point of discomfort. She asked if I was upset about something she'd said, and for a moment, I was tempted to deny it, to brush it off and tell her no, everything was fine, because that's what I'd always done. But the truth was, I was upset, and pretending otherwise didn't feel fair to me or to her. I stayed silent, unsure of how to respond. She took my silence as confirmation and said she hadn't meant to offend me. She said she'd just been telling the truth. That she liked me now and had no problem saying so. Her words felt like a double-edged sword. On one hand, she was trying to make amends. On the other, it still stung that her affection seemed conditional, tied to how I looked or how much I weighed. I found myself blurting out how hard it was to reconcile her words. I told her it felt like she only liked me because I'd lost weight, and that made everything I'd done to please her feel hollow. I told her I'd put so much effort into making her feel welcome, cooking for her, planning holidays, and going out of my way to strengthen her relationship with her son. And yet, all of that seemed to pale in comparison to how I looked. Her response was quick, almost too quick. The words tumbled out in a rush, as though she had rehearsed them in her head before picking up the phone. She said she appreciated everything I'd done over the years, that she wasn't ungrateful for my efforts, and that she didn't mean to make me feel undervalued. But there was something in her tone, a tightness, a defensiveness that didn't quite match the sentiments she was trying to convey. It was as if she was saying the right words but couldn't hide the sharp edge beneath them. I wondered, not for the first time, if she truly understood the weight of her words and how deeply they had cut. The kind of hurt they left behind wasn't fleeting. It lingered like an ache you couldn't quite shake. Then, almost as if to deflect or soften the conversation, she changed gears abruptly. She asked if I needed help cooking for Thanksgiving this year. Her voice had taken on a lighter, more casual tone, but the question still caught me off guard. It felt out of place, jarring in its sudden shift from an apology or at least an attempt at one-two logistical planning. I hesitated, unsure of how to respond. For a moment, I let the silence stretch between us, weighing her words and what they might mean. When I finally answered, my voice was cautious, like stepping onto thin ice. I told her I wasn't sure yet, that I might not host Thanksgiving this year at all. The pause that followed was palpable, almost vibrating with the tension it carried. I could feel the weight of her silence on the other end of the line, like she was gathering her thoughts or her composure. When she finally spoke, her words came out sharp, almost incredulous. "Why not?" she asked, her tone filled with disbelief that was impossible to miss. I could picture her expression so vividly in my mind. It was as if she were standing right in front of me. Her eyebrows would be raised, her lips pressed into a thin, slightly disapproving line, as if I had just suggested something outlandish and unthinkable. Canceling Thanksgiving, canceling tradition was, to her, not just unexpected but almost sacrilegious. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before I spoke. The air felt heavy, and I could feel my heart beating in my chest, each thud a reminder of the risk I was about to take by being honest. I told her the truth as gently as I could manage. I said I was still upset about what had happened between us, that her words had left me feeling small and hurt, and that I didn't feel ready to host a holiday for someone who had made me feel that way. I chose my words carefully, trying to balance honesty with restraint, but they still landed with a heaviness I couldn't avoid. The truth hung between us, a tangible thing neither of us could ignore. Her reaction came swiftly, her tone rising with a mix of exasperation and frustration. She said I was making hasty conclusions, that I was taking her words too personally, as if my feelings were an overreaction to something insignificant. "This isn't something we need to decide right now," she added, her voice tinged with impatience. The dismissiveness stung, like she couldn't quite believe that I would let something she considered minor affect something as important as a family tradition. I could almost hear her disbelief crystallizing into irritation, her inability or refusal to see the hurt from my perspective widening the gap between us. I stood my ground. I told her that hosting Thanksgiving had always been something I did with joy, something I poured my heart into because I wanted everyone to feel cared for. But this year, the joy wasn't there. How could I find joy in cooking for someone who'd made me feel like I wasn't good enough? It wasn't just about her words, it was about the accumulation of everything. The emotional labor I'd carried, the efforts I'd made to bridge the gap between her and her son, all while wondering if she actually valued me or if she just tolerated me because she had to. She responded, almost forcefully, that she did like me, that I was wrong to think otherwise. She said she hadn't meant to hurt me and that if I'd been offended, it was a misunderstanding, not malice. But even as she spoke, I felt a familiar frustration bubbling up. She wasn't apologizing, she was explaining, justifying. And while I appreciated her effort, it wasn't what I needed. By the time the call ended, I felt drained. She hadn't convinced me to host Thanksgiving, but she'd planted a seed of doubt. Was I overreacting? Was I letting my hurt feelings get in the way of the bigger picture? Or was this a chance to set boundaries and protect my own well-being? I still don't know what I'm going to do. Part of me wants to hold firm and skip Thanksgiving this year. To take a stand and show that I won't keep bending over backward for people who don't truly value me. But another part of me feels guilty, like I'm letting my emotions ruin something that matters to the rest of the family. For now, I'm sitting with the discomfort, hoping clarity will come before the holiday arrives. All I know is that something has to change. I can't keep pouring myself into relationships that feel one-sided. And I can't keep hosting holidays if my heart isn't in it. Whether or not she understands, that isn't something I can control. Update 2. It had been a few days since my awkward and draining phone call with my partner's mom. I'd managed to push it to the back of my mind for the most part, focusing on work and trying to keep myself from spiraling into overthinking everything she'd said. But the unresolved tension still lingered, like a low hum in the background of my thoughts. I hadn't made a decision about Thanksgiving yet, and every time I thought about it, my stomach twisted into knots. That morning, I was cleaning up around the house when my partner approached me. I didn't notice him at first, but when I turned, I saw he was standing there, shifting his weight from foot to foot in a way that immediately signaled he had something on his mind. He looked hesitant, even uncomfortable, and I knew whatever he was about to say wasn't going to make me feel better. "She wants to talk to you," he said after a pause, and for a moment, I didn't even realize he was talking about his mom. But then it clicked, and I felt a sudden rush of irritation. Of course, he hadn't said a word about the situation until now, until his mom had likely pushed him to intervene. I couldn't help it. I laughed, sharp and humorless, not because it was funny but because it was so predictable. Finally, I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm, "You have something to say about all this." And honestly, it wasn't fair of me to say it like that. I knew he wasn't confrontational by nature, especially when it came to his mom. But after days of sitting in my own frustration and hurt, I wasn't exactly feeling charitable. He looked taken aback, and for a moment, he just stood there, as if weighing his next words carefully. Then, in the softest tone possible, he started talking about Thanksgiving. He said he understood why I was upset, but he thought it would mean a lot to everyone if we went ahead with the holiday as planned. He pointed out that it wasn't just about his mom, it was about the kids, about family traditions, about creating those special moments we'd worked so hard to build. Hearing him talk about it made me feel a confusing swirl of emotions. On one hand, I could see where he was coming from. Thanksgiving had become this cornerstone of our family life, something the kids looked forward to and something I'd always taken pride in hosting. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the feeling of resentment bubbling beneath the surface. Was I really supposed to just brush off everything that had happened and carry on as if nothing was wrong? I told him I'd think about it. It was the only thing I could say in that moment, because I didn't trust myself to say more without either breaking down or snapping at him. He nodded, as if he'd expected that answer, and left me alone to stew in my thoughts. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back to Thanksgiving. The idea of hosting it felt exhausting, not just physically, but emotionally. It wasn't just about the cooking or the cleaning or the planning. It was about the underlying hurt I felt, the sense that I'd been bending over backward for people who didn't truly appreciate me. And yet, I couldn't deny that there was a part of me, probably the people-pleaser part, that didn't want to let anyone down. By the evening, my partner approached me again. This time, he was more direct. He said the kids had been asking about Thanksgiving, wondering if we were going to do it this year. That hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't thought about how my decision would impact them. To them, Thanksgiving wasn't tied up in complicated emotions or family dynamics. It was just a time for good food, togetherness, and maybe a little too much dessert. The thought of disappointing them made my chest ache, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore my own feelings. I couldn't ignore the way hosting had started to feel less like a joyful tradition and more like an obligation. I couldn't ignore how hollow it would feel to go through all the motions while still carrying the weight of everything that had been said and done. So, I told him I was still thinking about it. He nodded again, his expression unreadable, and left me alone, but this time, his words stayed with me. I couldn't stop picturing the kids' faces if I told them Thanksgiving was canceled. I couldn't stop thinking about the family recipes we always made together, the laughter and the chaos of everyone gathered around the table. I couldn't stop wondering if I was letting my emotions cloud my judgment or if taking a stand was the right thing to do, even if it was hard. Part of me wanted to dig my heels in, to say, no, I'm not doing this. Not this year. But another part of me wondered if there was a way to reclaim Thanksgiving for myself, if I could host it on my terms, without feeling like I was bending over backward for anyone else.